Welcome to the Accomplished Impact Podcast, where we explore what it truly means to accomplish with life with a focus on purpose-driven leadership. We'll be releasing new episodes every other Tuesdays at 6 a.m, so be sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover the inspiring journeys of leaders who are making an impact. In each episode, we sit down with visionary business leaders who are not only achieving remarkable success, but doing so with a deep sense of meaning and purpose. I'm your host, Benjamin, and in today's episode, we're joined by Rodney Koh, partner at Azri Lee Swee Sing & Co., former investment banker and head of corporate finance for a commercial bank in Malaysia, and corporate lawyer for the last 25 years. Welcome to the show, Rodney.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So maybe for those of the people who don't know you so well, maybe you can just give a brief intro about yourself.
Okay. Hi. My name is Rodney. I'm from KL. Okay. And I was a lawyer both here in KL and in Australia. I also spent 6 years in the investment banking community, where I worked for Arab Malaysian and then eventually became head of corporate finance for a commercial bank.
So you've got a lot of experience in commercial banking, especially finance and investments, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think, and today we're actually going to talk about financial recessions or dealing with recessions. And I think especially in a time that's uncertain like this, this is something that's on the mind of a lot of people. Can you share with us perhaps your background in dealing with these recessions?
Well, recessions are cyclical. They happen anytime between 7 to 10 years in cycles of those periods. And I've lived through quite a few of them for obvious reasons. And every time one of these cycles happen, there are certain companies that thrive, but many also fail. So the things that I want to share today with you really have to do with my observation among my clients, the people I've dealt with, on those who have able to weather the storms, so to speak, and come out well, and those who are less fortunate and weren't able to.
And why do you think this conversation about recessions is important, not only for business leaders, but for everyday people? Why is it a conversation that they should be having or they should be hearing about?
The ebb and flow of economic growth, it's a fact of life, It affects everybody. Nobody is exempted, from the employee all the way up to the CEO and director, right? And so one has to be very aware that these changes do happen. Some say they are inevitable, and perhaps they are. And we have to be prepared for them. We have to be prepared to adapt. We have to prepare to change the way we do things or change our outlook and expectancies in order to deal with the new situations that inevitably arise after such changes.
Yeah, and I think talking about those changes of a recession, perhaps maybe you can share with us what was your first recession like? How did it impact you, or what do you think the environment around you was like?
Well, the very first recession that I had experienced, I was still in university in 1987, and then in 1991, when I was practicing law in Australia, Australia fell into a very deep recession itself. I was very fortunate in the sense that it didn't affect me personally in a deep way. I was able to weather the storm, so to speak, but many were not so fortunate. The one recession, of course, that comes to mind is the 1997 Asian currency crisis, which hit Malaysia like a tsunami. I was head of corporate finance of that bank at that time, and really saw the terrible effects of an economy that grinds to a halt, literally grinds to a halt. And what effect it had on the lives of the people then. It was absolutely terrible. It really was.
And has that recession perhaps changed your, whether worldview or view on the economics of the world?
Well, as I said, recessions are in effect a fact of life in a capitalist society that we actually have. So what I would say is that it always pays to be fully aware of what's going on, Say you are a business owner, I will use a small business owner as perhaps one of the better examples. Say you're a business owner. There are three things you must bear in mind and be ready for always. Number one, you must always actually make sure that you prepare, okay, for bad times ahead. Now, it sounds counterintuitive, especially when times are good, but it is when times are good that is when you make the best preparations. For instance, many of the companies and my friends who survived recessions had in their bank accounts 12 months cover. In other words, they were able to cover salaries for 12 months without actually earning a single cent in income. Those were very conservative values. I know of companies who did that, and the younger people were complaining about it. But when the recession came, they were very glad that they had the reserves to have. So you've got to make your preparations. And your preparations must always be done not in the bad times. Yeah. You got to do so in the good times.
Because by the time you don't have the cash flow,
exactly.
You don't have anything. Yeah.
You don't have the ability to actually build up your reserves, especially for small companies. So always make your preparations ahead of time, all right? And it doesn't mean that you cannot enjoy the fruits of your labor. Building up that reserve and keeping the reserve there is just wisdom, okay? And anything else in excess of that, of course, you can enjoy the fruits of your labor, and you should, all right? But nevertheless, always having an eye of having sufficient reserves is a wise thing to do. Okay, build your sufficient reserves. Always look at changes in market trends, okay? That is a given in the way the world works today. Like, for instance, 15 years ago, if you told me that our malls in Malaysia will all be suffering and dying, I would say, nah, that's not true. Malls are doing well. People like going to malls. But you can see that because of changes in trends, these things happen, all right? So you've got to be prepared for things like this. You've got to always watch for cause and effect, okay, of that happens throughout every layer of the economy. So preparation is important. Okay, and then the second thing is adaptation. When it happens, even when it happens, or when changes happen, okay, you've got to prepare to adapt. And the adaptation might be required not because of recession, because of market changes. It itself, okay, would necessitate you having to retool and rethink your market. Unfortunately, I know of people that friends, unfortunately, who even had public listed companies, and they were manufacturer of industrial goods. Yeah. And for years, their business was doing so well. And that was the problem. They were doing so well. When the market shifted and there were imports coming in from China undercutting them, instead of changing their business model, they stubbornly stuck to what they did. Unfortunately, today, the company is no longer listed. In fact, it's been wound up by creditors. Right? The inability to adapt to a changing market, okay, itself can be very dangerous, just as dangerous and lethal as a recession. All right, so having the ability to adapt is something that you've got to be willing to do. And thirdly, more than anything else, is navigation. You know, you asked me about the 1997 crash and what actually happened. Well, many companies were knocked off their feet. Some of them used to be very big companies, then became very small companies. Many no longer existed. But what came out of that was a more resilient and a more, hardy economy. An economy that was those who could adapt, those who could change, they were able to thrive and survive eventually. Even the banks had to change the way they did their business, and they became far more cautious, and they became much better governed in itself, to the extent that that by 2008, the other recession that I lived through, where Lehman Brothers collapsed, where the banking system in the United States collapsed, because we had come out of the 1997 recession, learning the lessons, it hardly affected us. You see? So it is those things, those lessons which are very important. We got to learn from what actually happens and prepare and adapt and find your way to a firmer footing for the future.
Yeah, so you talk about preparation, but I think even before preparation, there perhaps are warning signs that a crisis is incoming. Were there perhaps any warning signs that in hindsight you realized, hey, these were the warning signs of all these crises that we should have listened to and we should have made preparation because of these signs?
Okay, that's an extremely good question. What are the warning signs? Short answer is there are always warning signs for bad times and good times at the same time. Okay, there will be people who are bulls and there will be people who are bears. What one has to do really is to truly understand causes and effects. Right? And that requires wisdom, it requires education. And by education, doesn't mean getting a piece of paper with a degree on it. Education is truly understanding how the economy works. You can, how things actually work in real life. It's not by paper and models that we learn off a book. Not that I'm poo-pooing degrees. I think they're important. But those are just tools for us to actually learn causes and effects. I'll give you an example in 1997. By about 1995 and 96, while I was still an investment banker, it was quite clear that the economy in Malaysia, in Thailand, and in Indonesia was overheating. Okay, we were boasting growth rates of more than 10% per year in GDP, which is a fantastic number. And the worrying sign was banks were actually saying that loan portfolios were growing 20% on year. They were growing so much. Okay, now for some people, that's great. That's fantastic. That means we are set for a great deal of profits. For others, looking at it, say this is unsustainable. It's overheating. We've got to get out of the kitchen. All right. So as I say, you have signs, right, that mean different things to different people, right? So it is where you have the wisdom of being able to look at it and say, this is not going to be sustainable. Problem is, there is a herd mentality in society per se. When things are good, everybody rushes one direction. When things go back, they rush back the other. You have to be firm enough, strong enough to make decisions for yourself. You really have to. And that is where it comes down to experience. It comes down to character. That's very important. It comes down to prudence on your part, right? That's why I say that the companies that had 12 months cover all survived. Those that didn't, and many didn't, they fail. One of the worst things about what I call the herd mentality is that because everybody thought the banks were all doing so well, everything was doing so well, all were caught up, they ended up over-gearing, borrowing so much money because the banks were very keen to lend money. How do you think they got this 20% growth rates in loans, which is ridiculous, right? Okay, but it is at the height of all this hype, that's when your danger signs are. You know that this thing is not sustainable. It is at that time you can best prepare for what's coming, right? So, but being always prepared is probably the best policy.
Yeah, that's good. And I think when we talk about preparation, on in terms of practical handles that businesses can take, besides having 12 months of cash flow, which is very important because if you can pay salaries, pay your rent, these are things that you don't have to worry about. But what are perhaps other practical steps that businesses can also start thinking about and start taking?
The businesses that failed, the people who I knew whose business failed, had one common problem. They had too much gearing. Okay, I'm an ex-banker and I'm not saying gearing is bad. Gearing is good and if used properly. The problem is do not get caught up in the hype. Hype is very easy to be carried away with, once you're caught up in the hype. And they ended up gearing themselves. And the worst thing was because there was so much liquidity in this country at that time, right? The money had to go somewhere. So they wanted to lend everybody, money in itself. So when that was too much money, chasing too few goods itself, that was when the problem starts to happen. These are things that you've got to worry about. So always check your gearing levels. Stress test your companies. Okay, what happens if businesses go down? How much can I survive back? Check your overheads. Okay, all right. Now, it doesn't mean that companies that do well shouldn't get fancier offices. I think good offices and nice environment to work is important. That is the case. But there were some companies where the CEO's office was 1 million ringgit.
Wow.
All right.
Which is unnecessary.
1 million ringgit. And this is in the 1990s. So you can imagine how the CEO's office renovation was 1 million ringgit. Is that necessary? But the hype can get there. So don't be caught by the hype. All right. Always take a far more sober assessment of what things are. All right. I felt that this is probably showing my age, but I used to say that some of the best Chinamen, businessmen that I would come around, walk around in these short slippers and t-shirts and go to the bank, deposit money in plastic bags of cash, right? It sounds very quaint. It sounds very silly. But those people that took very conservative views never had to worry about a rainy day. They survived.
That's so good. Yeah, I think especially when it comes to businesses who are growing, there's a lot of emotion. It's like, yes, I'm doing so well. And everyone just gets too excited to some extent that they lose sight of that prudence, that wisdom, that they just think, okay, just grow. And I think, that's very important. But I think maybe what about individuals? Because I think we talk a lot about businesses and business being able to be resilient in economic crises. But how can individuals, like an everyday Joe like me and you as normal people, prepare for these things?
Again, make sure that you actually have adequate amount in terms of savings itself. I know that the advice today is to actually make sure you are adequately invested rather than saving, because your savings may not keep pace with inflation. That is true. But you see, again, having a keen eye and observation of what's going around is very key and very important. And you have to have the willingness to make tough decisions very quickly and act on it. You see, I know somebody who, after Donald Trump got elected, started to keep a very close eye on what he was saying and what policies he was going to do. January 20th, he was inaugurated. Early February, what he did was, this chap that I know called up his broker and said, sell everything. Okay, sell everything, all my stocks, especially the unit trust in American and overseas stocks, sell everything and convert everything to Singapore dollars. And that's what he did. Okay, and because he did that, all right, he has been able to save and preserve the value of his investments till today. In fact, until today, he's still holding on to the Sing dollars. He hasn't changed anything. And he's still watching what is going on right now in the world.
He must have been very glad after the stock market crash.
The reason was, again, being fully aware of what's going on is very important. Donald Trump had said that he was going to implement tariffs. He had said that as part of his election platform, right? Okay, and nobody took him seriously. But when the market finally realized that he was really going to do what he said he was going to do, right, the market all crashed. And because the implications of such a drastic move are just so far-reaching, and we're now beginning to see the effects of that. Okay, all right. It's just another example of how systems that we have in capitalist societies are sometimes very fragile. When sentiment actually goes south, everything goes south very quickly.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to situations like this where there's uncertainty, there's also a lot of information out there, which means to say some people are saying that because of Donald Trump, there will be growth, for example, or because of Donald Trump, there will be, the stock market crashing. How are we able to filter out all this noise and come to a decision that perhaps is, I know prudence and wisdom, but is there any key indicators or any metrics you will do to kind of assess what is information that's valuable and what's just noise and what is just the herd mentality?
Okay, this is where my third point, navigation. Okay, first is preparation, adaptation, and navigation. When we navigate this very difficult and seemingly chaotic matters like this, my fundamental advice is go back to basics. Okay, there are basic principles to economic theories, to legal theories, to everything, the models that we use to run our world. Okay, go back to them and ask yourself, what do the fundamentals say about this particular course of action? Because you see, once you strip the thing of the hype and look at dispassionately at what you actually are doing, you will know whether it's actually going to work or not. All right. And fundamentals will be the fundamentals for every field and area: law, economics, finance, right? Yeah, even medicine or anything else that has to touch with society. Go back to the fundamentals. Those will always be your bedrock. Okay. Another thing that I want to say about fundamentals is that to the people that I know who survive the ups and downs of the capitalist system, those guys stuck to their fundamentals. Not only did they understand their own business well, okay, they also understood what were the causes and effects that affects their business, affects them even as people, right? Understanding that very well and watching for those elements, how it actually impacts them, helps them steer, okay, their business during difficult times. All right. What you cannot do is that especially in this day and age, it's new for me. It's of course very, very new. This social media age where there's so much stuff that comes out there. You've got to stick to your fundamentals and know, yes, this guy is talking sense. This guy is talking nonsense. Right. Okay. And knowing that will help you steer through, okay, this very, very difficult, the noise out there that's vying for your attention. The worst thing is that because of the way media is now, okay, they are all very sensational. No, sensationalism, headlines and stuff like that. Pulls you one side, pulls you another. Really look past all that sensationalism and look at what the fundamentals are. You will never go wrong.
Yeah, that's so true. I think I like what you said about being understanding of and truly understanding your company and truly understanding the political scenario. I think especially when it comes to even businesses, there are some business owners who I've heard of that perhaps don't know their cash flow, don't know their financial status of the company, and that's terrible, right? Especially for young and growing businesses, like even my small business, right? They need to have put a lot of care into making sure that they know where the business is standing, because if they don't, they're kind of set up for failure already.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. One of the good things about small businesses, I'll make a point of this. Small businesses in tough times, okay, seem to be buffeted the most because they don't have that much reserves against that. But I would say the small businesses, if the people who own it are agile enough, they're able to adapt, they're willing to, I've got this nice office, I'm going to give up, take it back home, start from home again, are willing to endure the difficulties and adapt, okay? Small business sometimes have a better chance of surviving because you're agile. Yeah, the agility of a small business is something which is underestimated sometimes. Let me go back to the example of the public listed company that failed. Unfortunately, the owner of the public listed company was stuck in a sunk cost fallacy. He said, I have run this business for so long. I even have port facilities, my raw materials, all this stuff. If I don't do my business the way it is, it will be a waste. It will be a shame. All my plant and machinery, all my factories, all the money I spent, what will happen? What you should have done was actually bifurcate his business into, yes, he can continue manufacturing but cut it down, but then import all those other materials from overseas and compete with the fresh importers. He had one big advantage that he did not take off. He had an existing customer base. Imagine if he had said, look, there are people who are cutting into my lunch. They're bringing in cheaper imports from China. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, but I already have my customer base and those guys will buy from me. I will lock them out. He didn't think that way. He just kept doing his product and said, I don't want to lose all this, whatever I've spent on money. He was so stuck in his sunk cost that it sunk him.
I think that's what's interesting, because although he was stuck in his sunk cost value, to some extent he could still depend on his, in a sense, sunk cost, which is his logistic lines and even his shipping and whatever.
He had so many advantages, you see.
Yeah.
So many. The incumbents always have tremendous advantages. And if the incumbents are just willing to change the way they do their business. Now, it might mean laying off half his workers because he doesn't need so many workers to run, say, at half capacity. So what? At the end of the day, I survive. Okay, I survive and I change my business model. I can continue to thrive. Right? Eventually, he lost all his customers in the end of the day because his product, because it was manufactured with raw materials from another country, was just so expensive. He kept saying, well, mine is a premium product. Okay, no doubt his product was better, but is it that much better that your clients are willing to pay that premium for it? You see? So you've got to start thinking like from the point of view, will your clients or will your customers be willing to go along with your ideas? Does it actually gain traction with them? It didn't. So when the company all went down, I had the sad job of selling off his assets for that company. It was very, very sad.
But what advice would you have for business leaders who are, in a sense, paralyzed because they say, I've built all this already. I've spent tens of years hiring all these workers. I've got so many ports. I've got so many factories. I don't want to let go. What advice do you have for these business leaders?
Okay, the advice is twofold. Number one, your people are your assets. Yet on the other hand, do not get sentimental with your business. Okay, you're gonna have a terrible struggle of balancing, the people that help you build the welfare of the people that help you build your business against the need for you to really cut down and redo. Okay, my belief is that you should be not afraid to actually restructure your businesses at any time. If, for instance, if you feel that you feel that you need to shrink your business, talk to your staff, talk to your people. Okay, tell them the truth. Your people can take it. All right. Help them find new jobs if you're cutting down staff. Help them start new businesses on their own so they don't sit on your payroll. All right. That's my belief. But you've got to be prepared to change the way your business is run at any time itself. Don't be so sentimental like, we did this, we set this first type of manufacturing for XYZ product in Malaysia 20 years ago and stuff like that. Yes, that was 20 years ago. That was really great. Yeah, but it's not going to help you now. Okay? You've got to let that go. Okay? Let that go. And you've got also do so. I would advocate that you do so humanely, do it nicely, keep the welfare of your people who walk away from you. Okay? Look out for them because things might turn around and you might need to grow again. And the first people you should call are your ex-employees, right? You've got to be prepared to let them go, help them find new jobs, see what you can do for them, yet at the same time, always bear them in mind so that if you have a chance to bring them back in, bring them back in.
But I think that's perhaps even better than the business completely failing because let's say you cut half your staff. That's just half. But if your business fails, that's it.
Everybody's gone, right?
100%
Correct.
is gone. Yeah,
absolutely correct.
You hurt more people in the process because it's like when it's gone, there's no backup. There's probably no severance if your company is being winded down by creditors.
That's right. And there's no coming back for it.
Correct.
You've hit a good point, Benjamin. The thing is, keeping that business alive, keeping it going is probably far more important than it is just saying, I'm just going to hang on to it. I'm not going to change the adapt and you watch the ship sink. I'll give you an example of this firm. When the pandemic hit us in 2020, the partners of this firm had a very difficult decision to make. We didn't know what it was going to be like. We didn't know how long it was going to last, right? So we made a decision to cut everybody's salary by half and the partners take nothing. Okay, and when we announced it to the staff, some of the staff members were very upset. They said, "How can you cut my salary in half? I've got obligations and things like that." And we understood where they were coming from. Some even got very emotional and started. One even started yelling at me, and said, "Boss, you don't even think about us." And then they found out that many of their colleagues in the industry were being laid off. Whereas we had made a commitment, nobody is going to be laid off. We're going to keep all of you. And I'm glad to say that we didn't lay a single person off. Everybody survived. We paid them back whatever we owed them through the pandemic, by way of bonuses. And in the case of my own department here, I gave everybody a salary raise from before and made it permanent. Yeah. So it is working with people. It is getting people to understand the situation you're in. It is treating people humanely and nicely. But, at the same time, as you rightly say, if you've got to cut half the staff for the business to survive, you have to do it. Humane. You got to be humane, yet at the same time, you have to be dispassionate.
I think it's also all about adaptation because, like you say, you can't be just holding on to whatever you have. And I think talking about adaptation, you've seen and worked with a lot of businesses. What is perhaps the riskiest adaptation or the riskiest pivot that you've seen a business make that seems really risky but was worth it at the end?
I think it was during the pandemic when some of my clients in the food and beverage industry, which was hit especially hard in itself, they of course pivoted to finding ways to deliver food and services to people who were stuck in their homes. Okay, it cost them a lot. They actually had to find ways to get packaging machinery, things to be able to package drinks and beverages and food in a safe way so they can actually deliver it to their customers itself. They actually come up with more money, when money was bad, right? Okay, but they survived. They survived. They were able to generate income. There was no profit to be had, but there was cash flow coming in to give everybody something to survive on, their staff and their people. And I'm glad to say that client of mine right now is actually doing very well and expanding because the staff stayed on knowing that this company, their bosses took care of them.
And I think when it comes to, like you said, there's first preparation, adaptation, and navigation. I think when we navigate, how important are clients in that journey of navigation? Because I think for the most part, businesses are liable to clients, and businesses, they're always beholden to client. They always say customer is king, right? How do you navigate when perhaps there are clients telling you they want this, they want that, especially in times of uncertainty?
When times are tough, okay, understand that it hits everybody, including your clients or customers. The key thing is to work with your customers. Work with your clients, right? Okay. And I even go and say this, work with your competitors too, okay? Because everybody in the industry is in the same boat. Those who are able to actually sit down or at least discuss with their customers and say, what do you guys need? How can I support you through these particular times itself? Will be able to survive this through. Because what happens is that the people who are, it's like the proverbial storm. Everybody's tossed in there. There are pieces of a raft everywhere, but everybody gets their raft, comes together, hang on with each other. You have a better chance of surviving than if you are out on your own in itself, right? So, and that also pivots to the next point. When you see your clients and customers and be sensitive to their needs and changes, right? The markets, right, when they recover, may well be also changing, okay? May well also be pivoting in that way. You will know what trend it is. And you will also, that helps you in your navigation part. Okay, I know my customers are going to start thinking for the future when they rebuild, when this thing ends, right? This is what they're going to do. I'm going to assist them. I'm going to change the types of services that I do, products that I bring in to help them grow. Okay, because there's always a rebuilding part. All right. Okay. Do not, this too shall pass. Okay. Nothing lasts forever, even the tough times itself. But in the rebuilding stage, you've got to be ready to help your clients, customers, and the people you deal with the rebuilding, okay, so that you come out, okay, on the right side of the tracks, I always say, rather than headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, because I think what happens is a lot of businesses try to sell their clients the same thing even in times of recession, which is a bad thing. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Because your clients, their needs will change, okay? You adapt to those changes, work with them, and come back out very much stronger. During the pandemic, what we found ourselves doing was that we had clients coming in and say, we need contracts to be renegotiated. We need things changed. So we had to go in and talk to people to extend contract terms. And sometimes, in fact, say, old contract, let's throw it away. Let's get new ones there. And then we ask the client and how much they can afford in terms of cash flow. What sort of businesses, what you formally said you do not allow the kitchen to work without the front opening. Well, you've got to allow that to do so now, and allow places for Grab riders to come so they can pick food, make it easier. So landlords had to say, yeah, okay, fine, we'll open up the side gates and give the Grab guys more places to park their bikes and to redo essentially how business is done. And you'll be surprised that if you are decent to people, work with them rather than say the landlord doesn't want to reduce my rent, during the pandemic doesn't want to help us, but be reasonable, you will find a way out of this together.
I think that's so important. That's why you need to really not only just know what your customer wants, but have that relationship with them to be able to have conversations with them.
Correct.
Of what they truly want. I think when it comes to navigation also, like you mentioned earlier, for businesses, people are assets. Your staff and your team are assets. How are you able to help your staff and team also, navigate this and also be able to give them some sort of direction, but also enough peace to know that this is not the end of it, or giving them some sort of coherent narrative.
Correct. That's where leadership comes in. Okay, business leaders, business owners are leaders. Okay, I call them business leaders, business owners. To me, they're one and the same. If you are a leader, if you are a business owner itself, you need to set vision and direction. Okay, you're the captain of the ship. You've got to be able to have a clear vision of how we are going to get out of this. And that ability to have a clear vision to get out of even chaotic issues like that itself stems from active listening, active understanding what's going on, and constantly reevaluating. Okay, what's your direction? Reevaluating what you're doing. It's an active process. It's not something, okay, we go southwest and we just head there. No, that's not the case. In times of uncertainty, there are so many things happening all at the same time. All right, okay, that you really need to take in the information and process it yourself. Remember what I said about basics, okay, the fundamentals. Process it against the fundamentals that you understand on anything, economics, law, business. Those fundamentals don't change. Okay, it doesn't matter how bad it is. Process it, and then that way, and then work with your clients and customers. You will see trends and changes coming up eventually, so that you will know where you're going to come out of. One thing is key is that communicate with your team. Never leave your team in the dark. Okay, always talk to them, constantly talk to them. All right, share your thoughts and directions with them so that they know that my boss knows exactly what he's doing. Yes, it's a tough situation. I will work with him and we will ride this out together. And that's very important. Leadership is key.
Yeah. And I think you also need your people to support and rally behind you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Nobody is going to support you if you yourself are so uncertain and no idea. You can never do that. If a boss goes on and say, I don't know what to do, those words will kill everything. His business, his standing, everything. You can never do that.
And now is also a time of economic uncertainty, like you mentioned with the election of Trump in the United States, and the stock market's going crazy every day. What is your playbook for this time of uncertainty?
I think the only thing that we can actually do is to start looking out for again, new trends. And I can't say what we're doing in this firm itself because it's way too early. But we are already looking at saying which direction the world is going to go to. But certainly I would say that the United States of before, the United States that I knew when I was growing up, itself doesn't exist any longer. It's terribly sad because we have one major party in the United States that no longer believes in the international order that was created by the United States post-Second World War. All right? I mean, understand this. The international world order that was created by the United States, some people say that's a form of American imperialism. While I am sympathetic with that argument itself, right? But that international order was allowed small countries like Malaysia, okay, to trade, grow, and prosper because there were certain rules, right? For example, the World Trade Organization, Okay, that was against tariffs. All right, it started out as an agreement. It was called GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and became an organization where if a country is caught dumping goods onto another country itself, you can take it up to the WTO, and countries agree to be bound by its ruling. That's a way of keeping trade order properly balanced, right? Okay, and they are very well understood international legal frameworks that allow for the import of things like toy bears from China, soya beans from the US into China. All these things are very well regulated, and those things allow small countries like ours, all right, to grow. All right, and now that order is gone, the world may well, I'm not saying with any certainty because I'm no prophet, of course, but the world may well find an alternative replacement to that world order. So it would not surprise me that the move has already begun, that countries like China are already courting the EU. The EU is courting us. They're trying to actually finalize the free trade agreement that they've been negotiating with Malaysia for 13 years. So, 13 years free trade agreement. Donald Trump says he can get done with 90 countries in 90 days. I don't know how that's going to happen, right? So, but whatever the case is, what we are seeing is that there will be changes and pivot, because like it or not, everybody will be talking to each other, all right? And a consensus will emerge and a new direction will come, all right? So for us, the playbook is, all right, if that is the consensus going, what markets are we looking at? Okay, as an individual business here in Malaysia, will there be foreign investors coming in? Will Malaysia be an interesting place for foreign investors to come? If that is the case, then what are we doing to try to attract foreign investors? The government is already trying to do so and say that, the ASEAN trade bloc will be a very interesting market. They are talking about making it even more free, more integrated bloc. Okay, some old ideas are being revived. One retired diplomat was saying, hey, Tun Mahathir had this East Asian Economic Caucus, which used to do a free market from East Asia all the way down, from Japan all the way down to Southeast Asia. I say maybe that's something we can look at again. Yeah, it could well be. But all these things will be in flux for now, but they will crystallize. So we have always got to keep our eyes open.
Yeah, and I think that's what you said in the beginning, which is that this is just a phase.
It's a phase.
That if things really get bad, it's okay. Just brave it out. Just survive. If your business can survive, it'll be great, right? And it's just a phase. It will end. It will come to end, and there will be good times, right? Yeah. I think before we close, is there perhaps any one takeaway you would have for listeners who are listening to this conversation?
Never let fear grip you. Okay. I like to call fear as false evidence appearing real. Things are never as bad as they seem. Some will say that's because I'm an optimist by nature. All right, fine, I plead guilty to that. Always understand the causes and effects of everything that goes on. Go back to fundamentals. All right, okay. Never be afraid to adapt and change. And while you're doing all that, always keep an eye of which direction you are steering the ship. That navigation, because trends will happen, things will evolve, things will change, and a whole new order might come about, and you have to be prepared and ready to catch that new order. All right, just accept this, that at the end of the day, there will always be ups and downs, and it will come in different shapes and forms, ups and downs, right? And this is just part of life, So to my mind, as long as we know how to steer through the tough times itself, we will always survive. All right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rodney.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Thank you for spending the time and having a chat with me.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the Accomplished Impact Podcast. We release episodes bi-weekly on Tuesdays at 6 a.m. So if you haven't already, we urge you to subscribe, as we're on Spotify as well as YouTube. You can also follow us on our social media at accomplished.asia on Instagram and TikTok, where we post snippets of this podcast. If you want to find out more about the Accomplished community and what we do and how you can be a part of it, drop us a DM on our socials or email us at hello@accomplished.asia. We'll see you at the next one.